Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Allison Langerak-Tuzo. I'm the director of ARAS, and I want to thank you all so much for being here with us today as we celebrate the release of our newest publication, A Guide to ARAS, for analysts, candidates, artists, scholars, students, and any others who love symbolic images. This is a free online book, and it's available on our website at aras.org/guide. We are here today with four of the contributors to the guide: Tom Singer, Patricia Llosa, Bruce Parent, and Betty Sue Flowers, and we will have the opportunity to hear from each of them individually about their contributions. Before we get to that, I want to mention that we will have a few moments to take questions from the audience at the end of the program. And if you would like to ask a question at any time during the event, you can do so by using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. And now, without any further ado, I would like to introduce our first presenter. Tom Singer is a psychiatrist and Jungian psychoanalyst who trained at Yale Medical School, Dartmouth Medical School, and the C.G. Jung Institute of San Francisco. He's the author and editor of many articles and books, including a series of books on cultural complexes in Australia, Latin America, Europe, Southeast Asia, and the United States. His new book, A Field Guide to Cultural Complexes, The Battleground of the Splintered Psyche, will be released in December. In addition, Dr. Singer has co-edited a series of books on ancient Greece, modern psyche. His book, Mind of State, Conversations on the Psychological Conflicts Stirring U.S. Society and Politics, explores the many layers of conflict contributing to the polarization and dystopian mood of our times. Dr. Singer serves as president of the ARAS Board of Directors and has edited ARAS Connections for many years. Welcome, Tom.
Very happy to be here, and I'm very happy to be here with you and with all of the other presenters, each of whom has contributed really beautiful work to this guide to ARAS, which has been many years of putting it together. And we're very excited and very proud about the new guide. I want to start off by showing you the table of contents just to kind of familiarize yourself with when we're talking about the ARAS guide, actually what the content is and what we're talking about. In a way, today's session will be a guide to the guide. Because the guide itself is very rich and full with really meaningful content, I think. The first part is sort of, Patricia Llosa will be giving us her beautiful introduction, which I think is one of the clearest statements of the spirit of ARAS I've ever heard. And then I'll be saying a little bit about ARAS in terms of its history and what it offers in current projects and navigating ARAS. In part two, the fundamental aspects of the ARAS approach to symbolic images, we'll be hearing from Betty Sue Flowers and Bruce Parent, each of whom have contributed really fantastic articles to that section. And finally, part three is a whole series of examples of how analysts and candidates and other people have used ARAS to explore images and their symbolic content, and it's extremely rich, and I'll be speaking a little bit about that. One of the reasons we put together this guide was that ARAS, the name ARAS and the Archives for Research into Archetypal Symbolism, it's a rather formidable and somewhat esoteric sounding name, and so people can get the idea even from our title that we're somewhat academic and inaccessible and not easy to use or not particularly relevant. And the fact is that we've been working for years to make ARAS far more accessible, far more relevant, and as easy to use as possible with the incredibly wide variety of materials that we present. So one purpose of this guide is to show and show off how ARAS is attractive, approachable, unique, and relevant. Another purpose is to make clear the origins of ARAS, which were in the ARANOS seminars held in Ascona, Switzerland in the 1930s, and it was a group that gathered around Jung and other very prominent scholars for informal discussions that were very broad-ranging and also kind of where there was approach of many different disciplines contributing simultaneously rather than any one single discipline dominating. So the whole Aranos approach is something that ARAS has hopefully incorporated in how we're approaching symbolic images. A second purpose, of course, is to make clear what's available on ARAS now, a second purpose of the guide, and in the most practical sense, how to use ARAS, because it's not self-evident how to use ARAS. And another purpose is to lay out in the clearest possible way the underlying ARAS philosophy and approach to symbolic images and thinking, which my co-presenters will be presenting. Another really fine feature of our online ARAS site is something that our director, Allison Tuzo, has developed over the years, which are a series of short videos which actually inform you how to use ARAS in different ways. And this is very important because there are so many different ways that you can access information. In fact, it's very easy to get lost when using ARAS. And in some ways, we welcome getting lost, as the ARAS approach to symbolic images encourages meandering, it encourages wandering, it encourages stumbling upon, and all of that requires, in a sense, the willingness to get lost. But there's getting lost and there is getting lost. And we do want to help people be able to navigate the many different features of ARAS. And this first video that I'm showing here, the first image is a video that Allison has prepared on how to compile a group of images for a presentation or personal collection. Another wonderful feature of what ARAS offers and is also in our online site is our extraordinarily successful, now decade-long program in which we've been reaching out and bringing in a group of teenagers. Now the program exists in New York, San Francisco, and Los Angeles. We have 3 different ARAS teen programs run during the summer in which the purpose is to, for a week or 2 weeks, gather a group of teenagers who are interested in symbolic image and inform them through a series of meanderings around the city and looking at ARAS and exploring their own symbolic imagery to learn how to use and think symbolically in terms of images. And that's been an enormously successful program, and in some ways it epitomizes our desire to make what ARAS has to offer relevant not just to those of us elders who are going to be appearing today, but to a younger generation of people whom we hope will be literate in thinking about and using symbolic images. Another feature that you'll find in the ARAS online guide and in the on the site itself are a whole series of projects related to the books we've published, perhaps most prominent of which has been the Book of Symbols, which over the past 10 years was published by Taschen and I think has sold over 300,000 copies worldwide and been translated in 7 different languages. By the way, ARAS now reaches on a monthly basis. People sign in from about 130 different countries to use ARAS for different purposes. So it's really found a broad reach and application in the world, which makes us very, very proud. Another thing that ARAS offers and is highlighted in the ARAS guide is a series of programs that we present depending on what we think is important at the time. There's been a wonderful series running over a couple of years about Gaia, then and now, the mythopoetics of climate change. I think we've had 2 seasons of that program, and features a number of different people who are interested in Gaia, both in terms of the ancient theory of Gaia, but also the modern notion of Gaia in terms of the interdependence and interrelatedness of all living creatures and non-living organic life, inorganic life on the planet. So ARAS ARAS has the archive itself has some 18 or 19,000 images from just about every culture and epoch in history since the onset of humankind. And as I've mentioned, we have maybe I didn't mention, a quarterly publication of ARAS Connections that spans 2 decades of publications, all of which are available online for free. We have an extensive online library of books and articles. And finally, I guess I want to mention the concordance, which is a unique feature of ARAS. Basically, it allows you to look up any quote on any topic that Jung has ever spoken about, and it can help you focus your researches into specific areas of Jungian thought. And the concordance is a wonderful way of finding access to all the references you might want. So the fact is, there are so many different things on ARAS that one can feel overwhelmed by the variety and depth of the content. And our new guide of ARAS is designed to help you find your way until it is time to get lost. The final and one of the most exciting and original parts of the guide offers a section called In Greater Depth, that gives examples of how Jungian analysts, candidates, and others, and I want to emphasize others. This is not an exclusive place just for analysts or Jungian analysts or Jungian candidates. It's for anybody who's interested in symbolic imagery in any way. And so this last section of our guide features, I think, 12 or 13 different links to really extraordinary essays by various people, and I'm going to just show you a few of the images from that site. This is the Archetypal Power of Imaging in Video Gaming by Robert Tominski, and it looks at how video gaming, of course, more popular among young people than those of us on this program today, borrow heavily from archetypal imagery. And Robert Tominski has done a wonderful job of showing how video gaming relies heavily on archetypal images. Another one that sort of goes back into our history is something that I did on, it's called In the Footsteps, the Story of an Initiatory Drawing by Joseph Henderson. Joseph Henderson was a Jungian analyst who really is primarily responsible for the development of ARAS. He really had the vision of ARAS, and he made it happen along with a number of other individuals. In 1926, he was having trouble. He was in pre-med school, and he thought he was going to flunk and not get into med school. He was in London at the time, and so he made an appointment to see Carl Jung in Zurich, because he wanted to discuss a couple of dreams with Jung. And when he got to Zurich, he had made an appointment with Jung. Jung's secretary informed him that Jung was actually leaving the country on a vacation. And so Henderson instead did a symbolic drawing of what he wanted to discuss with Jung. And this particular article is about the symbolic drawing that Henderson did when Jung disappointed him. It's really an extraordinarily interesting archetypal journey of another era, but still quite interesting. And another one, just to show its relevance, Eagles and Jaguars, Archetypes and Myths in Gang-Entrenched Latin X-Men. In other words, symbolic imagery is not the exclusive domain of Jungians and an esoteric group of those who are interested. Archetypal imagery is of value and interest to anybody alive in a culture that parades symbolic imagery often to manipulate people. Another example of articles this one, I thought I'd end with the end. Satan's Mouth, or the Fount of Magic. What is it about the anus? And this is really a very interesting, challenging, and fun, and a bit off-color essay on the symbology of the anus, which is not something that we are likely to look at in our everyday life or think about. And ARAS does that. It goes into unexpected places in unexpected ways. So that's my brief introduction to the different kinds of things that you'll find in our new guide to ARAS, which hopefully frames it all in a way that you'll find it easier to use and excite you in the use of ARAS online. Those are my comments, Allison.
Thank you so much, Tom. That gives us a great idea of all of the good things that this guide contains. So many great resources available in this book. Thank you so much for being with us today. We will now move on to our next presenter. Patricia Llosa is a Peruvian-American Jungian analyst in private practice in New York City. She earned her undergraduate degree in archaeology and art history from the Hebrew University of Jerusalem and did graduate work at the School of Visual Arts. For more than 20 years, she worked as an administrator and educator at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. A graduate of Marion Woodman's Body Soul Rhythms Leadership Training Program, a Woodman Foundation faculty and board member, she has taught workshops in Ecuador, Ireland, Israel, Japan, Mexico, Peru, and Spain. Presently, she serves on the boards of the National Association for the Advancement of Psychoanalysis, Gradiva Awards, and ARAS, and is on the faculty of the Assisi Institute and the Jungian Psychoanalytic Association. Welcome, Patricia.
Welcome to the world of ARAS. My role today is to extend this invitation to all of you, and as Allison told us, anyone who's passionate about symbolic images. I wrote the introduction to the guide, and so I'm here to offer you an evocative initial orientation and give you a sense, as Tom mentioned, about the spirit of ARAS and its origins. So we will move from this beautiful, delicate evocation of welcome from ancient classical Greece and cross the threshold. So if there was a motto that I would carve above the ARAS entryway, it would be these words of the woman who birthed it from vision to reality, Olga Frobel-Captain. The deepest things in human life can only be expressed in images. And the Jungian scholars amongst you in the audience will hear the resonance with the oft-repeated quote of Carl Jung that everything of which we are conscious is an image, and that image is psyche. This is an image of the oldest of humankind's manifestation of symbolic images. This imprint of a hand that was created by blowing through a bone, this iron pigment, is hidden deep beneath the ground of the caves of Pechmerle, France. So the initial vision for what ARAS is today was an image archive that would house the constants of the human psyche across time and place. Art is the signature of man, is what G.K. Chesterton wrote. And Jung would say the hands are the instruments of doing. So when you dream of the hands, it means the doing or executing part of yourself, the way you touch things, the way you handle certain situations, they're all expressed by the hands. And everything that we have in ARAS, in the archive, all of the images come from that reciprocal exchange between feeling and idea and materiality. So we begin with this most ancient of images, which is really a way of saying, I am. So at ARAS, we have 18,000 images of this human engagement with both the material and the immaterial from around the globe. And these archetypal representations reach back across time and are also, as we just saw in Tom's presentation, moving into the future and are not necessarily all from esoteric, dust-covered traditions. Let me see. So here is a cabinet of curiosity. The cabinet of curiosity is sort of the esoteric background that I come from and that I'm speaking from, which is the original 18th and 19th century gatherings of material collections that became museums. So as with any collection or archive or cabinet of curiosity, ARAS encompasses a world and also an attitude towards it. So the English explorer Francis Bacon described these kind of collections in his Gesta Graeorum in 1594, which is even earlier, as containing the notion of transformative completeness. So this European tradition of the wonder cabinets included products of nature, products of man, and also the testaments of man's ability to dominate nature. So it was really a way of understanding the world. So the cabinet of curiosities, very importantly for our Jungian way of seeing things, also contained opposites, colossal giant bones and the tiniest carved precious gems, monstrosities and Platonic ideals of form and beauty, opposite ends of the same idea, bonded like a Janus-headed figure. And this again speaks to the containment and the scope that is present in the collection. So the cabinet of wonder had its shadow, and it conveyed symbolically the patron's control or knowledge of the world through its indoor microscopic reproduction. And of course, as something that really blossomed in the 19th century, it has the shadow of colonialism and imperialism. However, it's important to note that at ARAS, as Tom said, we're not simply maintaining a hermetic, esoteric tradition, but really exploring the shifts and movements globally with images and how they are read and how they are seen and how they are understood. Now, here you have an image of a pre-Columbian textile from Peru. And I just wanted to pair it with the cabinets of curiosity, because what you're seeing here is, as the cabinet of curiosity tries to do, which is to contain a world in itself, this textile contains the world in itself from the perspective of the ancient Peruvian culture, because the essence of that culture was about complementarity, and that's how wholeness was shown. So it's interesting to see the movement that are occurring now around the study of images, and to understand that actually at the start of ARAS, Olga Frobe-Kapton, who was the initial visionary, she sought out scholars who shared the skepticism that was very alive in her and at the time towards rational thinking as a privileged form of knowledge, and embraced a more intuitive and symbolic way of expression. And so there's a way in which they were harbingers at the start of ARAS that brought in what is now very much alive today in the spirit of reading beyond the Eurocentric perspective that asserts reason and the linear narrative, and really a deeper understanding of the importance of what Jung called intuitive thinking, or an intuitive way of looking at an image. And I will just tell you what the Aymara artist Elvira Espejo Acaya says about this way of seeing. She says, if the hands and eyes do not have a clear sense of the design, why would reason execute it? We execute not only with our head, but with our hands and eyes. That's why there exist words like makaraku, or thanks to my hands. And this creates another epistemological position. So in a way, I think it begins to bring in what initially the dream of ARAS was hoping for, which is a comprehensive science of the soul. So here we begin to go back to the origins. I've mentioned Olga Frobek-Captain, and here you see her if you haven't met her before. And her encounter with Jung is part of the creation myth of the archive. And they initially met each other in 1930 in Darmstadt at the Kaiserling School of Wisdom, which would be similar to what we know as Esalen today. And there were many spiritual pilgrims who were gathering to unite consciousness of East and West. So Olga was a spiritual pilgrim before she met Jung, and was interested in many aspects of the spiritual world. And she was connected with the Theosophists. And here you see some of her art before she and Jung started to work together. Here you see the dancers of Rudolf Laban in Ascona, which is the town, the area in Italy where ARAS, that Tom spoke to you about, initially emerged. You see these group of dancers who were part of this whole wave of people who were interested in going back to nature, and also developing a universal language to try to understand, I would say, the chaos of the world that they lived in post the First World War. And as Tom mentioned, many of the dancers, as Olga called them, who would come and gather around the round table at ARAS, were very prominent scholars, each in their own field, people like Indologist Heinrich Zimmer, classic philologist Carl Karenyi, Gershom Scholem, Mircea Eliade, and of course, Carl Jung. And here we see the gathering of the round table, of the ideas that have come together, and really a symbolic evocation of what we have hoped to do here for you with this guide, which is really bringing in many different perspectives and creating a space, again, which is both expansive and contained, to explore and meander, as Tom said. So I want to tell you about my initial spark, and I want to do that because really this is what one does when one comes to ARAS. It's what is the spark that is alive in you? What image do you absolutely hate, or do you absolutely love? So what galvanized my imagination here is a trunk. I could not get over this image of a woman traveling around the world with a trunk full of images, with the aim to understand the soul of the world. It still touches me deeply, and in a way, that's how I see ARAS still. It's really a seed, and whatever image awakens in you as you are with us this afternoon, I highly recommend or invite you to explore it in the ARAS database and find where it takes you, because it is a trail of libido that hopefully will end in a surprise. So this gives you a sense of what the collection of images looked like initially. Olga was creating these gatherings at ARAS, but then she and Jung discussed the importance of finding the images that embody the collective unconscious. So if you want, you can say she collected the collective unconscious. And here you see some of the panels of the clustering and the putting together of different images of the feminine mythology. What was really interesting is that she did this and that this happened before the internet was even a vision. So now we have a very different relationship to images, but at the time it was such an adventure to gather all of these together and be able to make these cultural comparisons and to get a sense of the flow or the meander of the different cultural images. So my background, as I said, was in museums, and that's how I stumbled into the world of ARAS. And really, I was in search of respite from the desert dryness of art historical analysis. So the word museum comes from the Greek museum, which originally means a seat or shrine of the muses. And here you see the entrance to the Museum of the Prado in Spain, where they have all the muses laid out. And museums can be experienced as mausoleums or dungeons of the ideal. They're ivory towers that store material culture, but don't necessarily give wings to their meaning. Here you see a sculpture of Quetzalcoatl. And once, while teaching at the Met, I was standing in front of this serpent god, and I encountered this dilemma. As you see, the curled stone serpent is patterned with intricately carved feathers, and it's carefully delineated in high relief, and it's basalt. And I was attempting to bring it to life by retelling the mythological exploits when, out of the quiet, a sharply voiced declaration from a small boy resonated. "Everything you said is a lie." A wave of schadenfreude rippled through all of the assembled adults, and my delight in my narrative fell away. I was affronted by the interruption, but I realized something. I realized that mythological consciousness was dead to this child, most likely killed off by a scientifically minded parent. So I paused and thought how best to respect his position without losing the value in mine. So I said, that may be true for you, but perhaps not for the people who made the sculpture. Look how much care the artisan put into making each feather. Do you think that's easy? Why would they spend so much time and effort on a lie or something without worth? Lie or not, this story was symbolic of a treasured value which was part of the sculpture's meaning. So every image is rooted in a culture and an embodied experience of living and of being human. Jung describes the wholly peculiar feeling which arises in us if, amid the noise and tumult of a modern street, we should come across an ancient relic. He refers to them as living, breathing, keys. That's what the images at ARAS are about. ARAS is a resource for this experience, where these images can be experienced as keys to a greater understanding of the archetypal dimension of the psyche. And that's also because of the wonderful, wonderful gathering, the devotion of so many analysts and scholars who have given of their time and their passion and written careful archetypal explanations and evocations and reverie. And that is really a priceless resource that is hidden here on the internet and in the offices of ARAS, both in San Francisco, New York, and well, there used to be an office in Chicago. So these are the keys. See the image of the face of Nefertiti from 1400 BC. And you see the wholeness that's present even in a fragment. Or this African power figure from Yombe, Congo, and how the image resonates with a body and the relationship between the ritual of placing the nails inside of the body of the figure to make it come alive. Or here with this incredible porcelain lohan from China from the year 1000. All of these images are rooted in a different culture and at the same time are living, breathing keys of a way of thinking, perceiving, and being. The ARAS collection contains images that return soul to the world. Jung wrote, "We have stripped all things of their mystery and numinosity. Nothing is holy any longer." He and others, and many of the contributors to ARAS, have worked tirelessly to remedy this imbalance. So as travelers or users of the archive, we create pathways for new understandings, and we do this by finding affinities, discovering visual alliterations through reverie, or feeling that spark that I told you about with my image of the trunks. You encounter unexpected meanings and create new patterns and narratives. This is what neuroscience is now terming neural couplings. And in this rapidly growing field of neuroaesthetics, it's considered crucial and generative action. A recent publication outlining this research, Your Brain on Art and How the Arts Transform Us, speaks to the importance of this creative activity for the brain, concluding that there is mounting evidence that the arts really do help us heal and thrive. Acts of art can enhance your life. So how do we orient ourselves to the unknown, to the mystery, or to find our way and choose with all of these images? We have the grand seigneur of art here. If you know exactly what you're going to do, what's the point of doing it, says Picasso. So that is also an attitude that we wish to invite. Take a risk, come in and play. We orient ourselves to this unknown territory, avoiding the monsters hovering in the depths. We turn to a guide or a structure, a map, to differentiate the known from the unknown. In ancient Roman cartography, the term hic sunt leones, here be lions, was used to qualify the dangers of unexplored terrains. Later, such medieval globes as the Hunt Lennox globe in the New York Public Library used the phrase, here there be dragons. Dragons hold the disparities of the known and the mystery symbolically. James Hillman says, we must mother these images, mother the dragons, mother the depths. Fantasies are very precious. They need supportive therapy. Therapy is a kind of mothering, not of the ego, but a mothering of the images, which anyway mother us, coming to us every night. So that's something to consider. How does one mother or attend or cherish or nourish an image? And part of that work at ARAS is just having this panoply, both of images and of different narratives prepared by analysts and by many others that serve to shed light on all of the different kaleidoscopic aspects of the image that are present. Here you see an image of the Great Mother by Olga herself, cultivating and tending the images of Psyche. That is a kind of refreshment because one receives the contact with the archetypal core or the essence that is at the heart or underneath or hidden in the image. And that connection is therapeutic. This day and age, we're flooded by images from without. And often this ubiquity of images reflects an impoverishment of the imagination. Again, a loss of soul or a loss of the body of the image, the loss of its archetypal valence. So it's so important to incubate and nurture these intuitive and perceptual relationships with our own images. Here you have another great mother, just to give you, again, a sense of all of these images of mother. This is Yashoda with the baby Krishna from the 12th century. So much devotion and so much mothering has also occurred just to keep ARAS as a living being archive going and alive. There's amazing women and men, but I myself am very struck by the caretaking of the women, and there have been, you know, wonderful curators like Jessie Fraser, who sold passionately her jewelry in order to keep it going. So I end with a few more images of evocation, of breath. Here, the statues of the gods in ancient times were thought to reply to earnest questions. So invite your earnest questions with images, as you see here in this kiss between Pygmalion and Galatea. And this Islamic camel brings to bear the idea of the multiplicity and the one, and how many parts of ourselves can be held within one particular form. And I end with this invitation and this image. This is an image by the Korean photographer Ata Kim, and it is a mandala that is created by him keeping an open camera for an hour while he and his wife made love. So there's the image both of union, of coming together, and the mandala. And I really appreciate the numinosity and the surprise that this image holds in it. So I leave you with this invitation as you find your own mystery and surprise as you explore ARAS. And this is from the mystical poet William Blake, his words from Auguries of Innocence. To see a world in a grain of sand and heaven in a wild flower, hold infinity in the palm of your hand and eternity in an hour. Through your perception and engagement with this guide, it can truly become, as this image, more than a sum of its parts. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Patricia, for giving us a taste of the spirit of ARAS and the wonderful history that continues to resonate and lead us forward. I love the image of the trunk. That's really wonderful. We really appreciate you being here. Thank you. Our next presenter contributed a piece on the concept of circumambulation to the guide, and we're grateful to have him here to explore that today. Bruce Parent is a Jungian analyst and licensed art therapist based in New York City. His background is in humanistic and transpersonal psychology, featuring Roberto Assagioli's psychosynthesis. His training in psychotherapy led to his work with non-traditional students at UMass Amherst, then to join a team created to address the needs of chronically unemployed adults in recovery, post-hospitalization, or in crisis. Bruce was director of the program before leaving to work as a part of a mental health team at Hampshire College. A few years after an MFA, Bruce got an MA in art therapy at NYU that led to years of work with hospitalized children at Mount Sinai and into private practice. He is on the board of directors of ARAS and recently served on the steering committee and as director of training at the Jungian Psychoanalytic Association. His studies on the history and development of depth psychology and Jung's work in particular have been a focus of his teaching and writing. Thank you for being here with us, Bruce.
It's a pleasure to join you today. I want to be able to sort of follow up a little bit and hopefully make a bridge from the piece that I did on circumambulation for the guide. So for those people who have read the article and for those who have not, I'll just do a couple of quick remarks to sort of form a bridge for you. Because what I'd like to do is sort of take you on a little bit of a journey through an example. I don't have a lot in the article itself for the example because the article itself was the example. And it's a little bit of a history about sort of how Jung got to use the term and deploy it in his own work on circumambulation. He, like the scholars that he would come to meet at ARAS 20 years later, his first ventures were understanding images through mythology, comparative religion, and wrote about that extensively. But that was before his own personal experience took him into greater depths and his own work with engaging his unconscious life took him into a place where he truly felt lost. And it was in that losing of himself that he'd come upon the Eastern notion of the mandala. And in that epiphany around a very simple circle, which is part of what I talk about in this article, Jung comes to realize that there is actually a process that goes on in psyche that is both autonomous and that is meaning-making, and that the mandala is a way to imagine that. And that actually, in some ways, both rescues him and sets him on a course to understand psyche as a self-regulating system. Knowing what he knows from that experience, he sort of deploys that same strategy around how to meet an image, which is a little bit different from what he had sort of taught himself and learned from comparative mythology and religion. And which is to say that he understands that the circumambulation that was going on for him is also a way to approach an image. And circumambulation is really used as a term to describe a sacred process of meditation. It's seen in Middle East, it's seen in the Eastern, and Jung does recognize that this was a way to describe what he had found to be an autonomous psychological process of growth. So that being lost and then found goes on repeatedly. And in that circling, that is a way to understand that there is a growth of awareness and of consciousness that's occurring through that process of circling. It's not linear and it's not rational. It is circular and it is repetitive, but it is also paradoxical. In the article, I mentioned that it's more like the formation of a pearl than the acquisition of knowledge. Right? As one circumambulates around something, it is you who are changed by the process of moving. Right? It is not the acquisition of something that you acquire through learning. In short, it's not about learning, it's not about mastery, and it's not about knowing. It's about meeting the condition of not knowing and being in a relationship to that condition. So circumambulating changes ego. It changes the eyes, the heart, and the mind, right? As in they are opened, or they are moved, or they are expanded. The unknowing is a steady state of being human. The mystery of not knowing is met by what Jung called a symbol, which is a bridge. It's an image from the unknown that can convey meaning when it's engaged. The circumambulating sacred sites or object was recognized by Jung as an archetypal process of engaging a mystery. Walking is a meditation in motion. It is an engagement with the humility of not knowing. One's attitude shifts from the effort to know or to learn or to study to a receptive attitude and a perception of new thoughts, feelings, and insights that arise from the contemplation. Circumambulating shifts ego's position from learning to listening. In dream interpretation or in any serious engagement with symbolic images, the beginning is about not knowing. The symbolic is not to be grasped as much as it is to be engaged, so that the symbol itself informs the mind. In the language of typology, circumambulating shifts what Freud would call what makes a demand upon the mind for work, from thinking to intuition and to feeling and to sensing. Unknowing is a state of being in humility. It is an attitude based on the admission that there's too much to know or understand. It's natural to experience this in any dream or in any deep emotional or spiritual crisis. Conditions of unknowing are troubling. Rationality and reason are impaired. Learning, directed thinking, theory, fact, authority, precision, argumentation, proof, and control are all suppressed. Circumambulating as a sacred practice is built upon the psychological fact that one has recognized that the unknown dwarfs the known. It's a link to the divine, and it's an act that honors the unknown and unknowing. Examples of circumambulating are found throughout Jung's writing as he works to circle symbolic images again and again to glean as much meaning as possible from the images, knowing only that a symbol, by his own definition, cannot be exhausted if it's alive, because it is a linking image to a living mystery. Jung's own meditations in Ion or Mysterium Conjunctionis are complex and beautiful demonstrations of him engaged in circumambulation. There are other examples. William Gass's 1975 book on Being Blue is a beautiful circumambulation around blue. Hillman on color in Alchemical Psychology. Alexander Thoreau's primary colors and secondary colors are also examples of circumambulating a simple image. There are many examples that can be found in the works that engage art or dreams as examples of what cannot be fully known, but they can be the beginning of a deep reflective process. The philosopher's stone in the Eastern tradition is an object that lends itself to a deep recurring action of an imaginative journey. It's an example of an image as a prompt to reflection. Da Vinci had a habit of throwing an ink-soaked sponge at the wall in order to see the landscapes that he would paint and draw. That technique may be as old as the shadows and the forms that appeared in the caves under the lights of torches thousands of years before him. The interpretive ventures into realms of meaning that are represented or painted or sculpted or in music are likely as old as the arts and that give rise to them. Iconological studies are a specialist area for some writing about art, and it's a complex and conflicted discussion group that includes Warburg, Panofsky, Gombrich, and others. And the ARAS project was one of those efforts to engage image and make meaning and find meaning. Jung's contribution was met there as bringing to that group of scholars a psychological point of view, a poetic reading of an image that was not just cultural and historical, that moved beyond definition and beyond amplification to sort of get at a psychological way of understanding symbolic images. So what I'd like to show you here today is a little bit of a story around a particular set of images that showed up more than 30 years ago now, which was the image of a sailboat. So again, to walk around a sacred image in the right contemplation has a deep cross-cultural history. It's an act of reverence and spiritual imagination, engaging a divine unknown. It is a way to be informed by what is sacred. Jung realized that circumambulation could be applied to symbolic images as unknowable fonts of meaning. Boats here are the focus of this contemplative walk as they recurred in the art of children in treatment for cancer. So this is a walk around an image of a boat, often one that sails, as a vessel that moves in realms of wind and sea. To circumambulate is a way to approach an unknown, here to learn of a journey of courage and risk and spirit. It's a way to appreciate that an image can express and contain a perilous voyage in the image of a boat and a life navigating through great forces. So one of the things that's always implicit is that the wind is on the ocean and around a boat. It's a determinative force. It's often seen as a spiritual, as in the winds of fate. It has a deep symbolic history and association of its own. For a sailboat, it's the relationship to the wind that's key to set a course in the direction of the vessel. The power of the wind dwarfs the scale of the vessel. It must be met. Dead on into the wind gains no ground. Options are available as sails can harness this power in billowing curves or as powerful wings. A vessel may heel in a dance between keel and wind. Steering boards strain to keep a steady course across the sea when the winds are up, and do little more than paddle without them. A quiet stillness, as small as moments or as vast as a doldrum, can stall a vessel in whispers of wind. These are some of the boats that were painted on a mural at the hospital that, once understanding that there were a number of the children that were doing boats, we created a large space for them. It was a harbor, and we invited them to come, and for 6 months they would come and start drawing their boats and adding them to the image as the mural would grow. To our surprise, not only did the children come, but some of the staff, the nurses and the doctors came to do theirs as well. The idea about sort of trying to understand why the boat was what sort of moved me in to start walking around this image, so that it was starting with the wind as a force that was acting upon these children. This is an image of the overall mural. This was about 6 feet tall and about 8 feet across. So there was a place we realized we started with a harbor side, but then realized we needed to actually put land, because for some of the children, the water and being at the sea was too much. So we needed smaller rivers and lakes and streams for them to be able to put boats in, because the sea was a little overwhelming. So when following the image of the boat and the wind is a way to begin to engage and try to understand more about why the boats were appearing and what purpose they might be serving for the children. When you start walking around the image of a boat, you not only bump into the wind, but of course the sea. And that's part of that image of the boat as well. And the sea can be placid or roiling or heaving. It is a place of great depth that contains both life and death. Melicenas and monsters and muses are found in deep waters. There is much the sea provides and much that is hidden. Water runs deep and currents are unseen. Seas react to winds and can be churned into great heaving storms, and all can be tossed about the fury that ensues. It makes for a difficult journey. The sea in one myth is a mother whale that swallowed the sun each night and gave birth at dawn to a new day. Here's a close-up of that mural. You can see that each one of those components, the small yellow sailboat in the distance, the small one in the front, the surfer, were all additions made by the different children that came to paint on the mural. The value of an image is the way it can convey so much about the state of something like a sea. We walk around that image some more. We come to the sail that gives the vessel the power to move through the seas by harnessing the winds. From behind is a great parachute, or as a wing meeting the winds abeam or ahead, as if beating against them and forcing them to give way ahead as they hold against the flow of the wind. As the hull meets the realm of the sea, so too does the shape of the sail meet the sky and the force of its winds. Another part of the boat is the mast. It's on the center line of the boat, bears the load of the sails. It is a wooden tree that links the vertical to the horizontal. The power of the heavens and the winds and the sky inform and move the vessel, and sea below holds it. It is an axis, a cross, a pole through which motive force is channeled and changes happen. It is a form linked to suffering and transformation. It transforms the unseen winds and forces that power the vessel. It marks the transit from life to death. The boat itself is a vessel. It must be shaped to meet the oncoming seas and to hurry before the following seas. Its profile below must be able to keep the vessel stable and upright, especially under sail and in heavy seas. Its prow meets these heavy seas by narrowing to a shape of a blade, and its stern may repeat the lines of the prow, or flatten to meet the seas head on, or be rounded to allow the following seas to part more gently around the stern. The form echoes the shape of an almond. In Italian, it's called mandorla. It is an archetypal form used in sacred arts, as it arises from the geometry of two intersecting circles and mirrors a deeply feminine principle. The vessel is also a cradle for life and death. The sailboat's shape links it to other vessels that are made for journeys, sometimes into sleep or the underworld. The form of boats repeats as cradle and coffin, all containing and protected vehicles for journeys. The boat carries one across the unknown depths. As cradles, it is a vessel to the land of sleep. As a coffin, it is a cradle vessel to the underworld. To circumambulate with some reverence around the image of the boat unveils an opening to its innumerable meanings. When in concert with each other, the many meanings give rise to a view that an image echoes more than what can be fully known. A sailboat echoes the womb, the cradle, and the tomb, as well as the implicit journey and the forces that shape the voyage. And Nekia, the boat, like the cradle, vessels for bearing the journey to a distant realm. The vessel, when a coffin, even as simple as a basket or box or hollow hold, is the core of a boat image when it is meant to cross the great inner unknown sea and arrive on the far shore beyond this life. And Nekia, our night journey, was Homer's description of Odyssey's journey to the underworld. It follows in the motif of the sun god Ra's journey into death each night to be reborn from the Great Mother each day. Ferrymen with small boats or great barges are employed to carry the dead to a new life. And so the boat, like the coffin, is a transport vessel. A resonance of the many harrowing aspects of each journey was quietly carried along in the unique, innocent images of boats created by each child on a perilous journey on the seas between life and death. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bruce. Wow, that was really wonderful. Thank you for exploring this concept and sharing these amazing images. So powerful. I was moved to tears several times during that. Please check out Bruce's piece in the guide on circumambulation. It's really an essential part of the ARAS approach to images. Thank you, Bruce. We're so happy that you could share that with us today. Our final presentation will be by Betty Sue Flowers, who contributed a piece in the guide on mythopoesis. And we are thrilled to have her here with us today. Betty Sue Flowers is a writer, editor, and international business consultant with publications ranging from poetry therapy to human rights, including 2 books of poetry and 4 television tie-in books with Bill Moyers. She has served as a moderator for executive seminars at the Aspen Institute for Humanistic Studies, consultant for NASA and CIA, visiting advisor to the Secretary of the Navy, public director of the American Institute of Architects, and editor of scenarios for Shell International in London and The Hague, the OAS, ESCOM in South Africa, the University of Oxford, and the World Business Council for Sustainable Development in Geneva. She was the series consultant for the PBS television series Joseph Campbell and the Power of Myth, and on-air consultant for the nationally broadcast The Mystery of Love. Before moving to New York City in 2009, Flowers served as a professor, director of the LBJ Presidential Library, director of the Interdisciplinary Honors Program, director of creative writing, and the Associate Dean of Graduate Studies at the University of Texas at Austin. Her most recent publications include Presence, Human Purpose and the Field of the Future, The American Dream and the Economic Myth, and The Primacy of People in a World of Nations in The Partnership Principle, New Forms of Governance in the 21st Century. Thank you so much for being here with us, Betty Sue.
Thank you, Allison. I'm delighted to be here. And I really am looking forward to our discussion following these brief remarks. I'm talking about mythopoesis in action, and this is only part of the chapter I wrote about. It's about half of it. And mythopoesis is really defined as activating archetypal images to make meaning and relating to images through story. So it combines myth and making. And this is important because, as you probably know, there's quite a distinction between the myth makers and the myth studiers. The most familiar of the archetypal narrative patterns, of course, is Joseph Campbell's hero's journey, which he introduced in 1949 with this book, and which filmmakers and storytellers have popularized ever since. They took his original, this is a Xerox from the book, his original quite complex, I guess you'd say a representation with its arcane references to elixir theft and father atonement, and they've modified it. You can find these ad infinitum on the internet, these images that are being used in films and stories. It's archetypal. So the images connected with the hero's journey is what I've used as an example of mythopoesis, mythical images in action. 14 years before Bill Moyers filmed his popular PBS series, Joseph Campbell and the Power of Myth, he had broadcast a very quick interview, like half an hour, with Joseph Campbell. And he told me that he got more interaction from that interview than he'd gotten from anything he'd ever done before. And he was determined to do a longer one, which he did years later. And I told him in response, he said, but why would this be? I said, it's not because of mythology per se, because there were a lot of mythology scholars in the world, but because Campbell connected myth and mythological images to our lives. He made them meaningful. He answered the so what question. So scholars continue to criticize Campbell's Jung-influenced monomyth, while creators continue to use it. They're both right. I'm not setting up an opposition, but saying that scholars privilege the specific culture that an image comes from, and the users of myth are more Jungian in that they look at how all these images are similar across cultures. And as I say, they're both right from where they're coming from. 2 years ago, oh, I should add this. I did put this in because I wanted to add a little shout out to ARAS. When I did this book based on it, I took my editor, Jackie Onassis, to ARAS in New York to choose the images for this book. And so I have a very personal connection to ARAS based on this long, long ago. So this is just a little inserted shout out to ARAS. Now, this kind of hero's journey as a model for storytelling, it's very, I guess you'd say, it's close to people's lived experience. Audiences resonate with it. To be called to adventure, to accept the call or not, to have a wise teacher or mentor, to face trials, then when you think you've got it all figured out, to have a bigger trial come at you, and then to understand what you've gained at the end and maybe what gift or legacy you have left. 2 years ago, this article appeared in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology, and it was a series of 8 different studies. Look at all these researchers on what are the implications of seeing your life story as a hero's journey. And they showed in this article how seeing your life story as a hero's journey increases meaning in life. What these researchers did was to distill Campbell's archetypal monomyth into seven key elements. Campbell, if I counted right, Campbell had something like 17. And these researchers said, okay, there's 7 main aspects to it. And they showed in this particular illustration what it looked like classically and what it might look like in modern terms in these images, so that readers could say, no, this isn't just an ancient series of archetypal images. We see them around us today. And one of the things that they did, they showed correlations. This is the scholarly look at the correlations of different studies, how people rated their meaning in life to their capacity to tell the story of their life as a hero's journey. Now, I'm not qualified to talk about things like this, which stands behind the way they figured this was so, but this is something that they have that shows it a little more, I guess you'd say, easy for those of us who don't do regression analysis and that kind of thing. Protagonist, I am a hero in a journey. Then the shift, part 2, in their simplification of Campbell's steps. I often have new experiences. The quest, my life has a clear objective. Allies, I'm supported by others. Challenge, I've had to overcome obstacles. Transformation, I've become a better version of myself. Legacy, I will have a lasting impact on others. Now, I do a lot of scenario writing for leaders, and one of the things that I'm very aware of is that the future is always and only a story, and that the leader's job is to tell a story very vividly of the future. I have a dream, or I can take you to the promised land. That's one of the jobs of every leader. Usually people tell the story of their past as a kind of extrapolation. The story of the future is a kind of extrapolation of the past, and they usually cling to the story of the past, not realizing, not making conscious that while the facts of the past are, if you're telling the truth, more or less fixed, the story of the past, the narrative, is not. You can change the narrative of the past. And while the official future is usually some kind of extrapolation of the past into the future, you can actually change that fiction too. And when you change the fiction of the future, you end up changing the experience of the present. It's very, very helpful to do this, at least according to what these researchers found and indeed showed. So how does this work? How does mythopoesis work? Myth and mythic symbols in action. The key practice is to first choose an image for the stage of the journey and then to establish a relationship with the image. The theologian Martin Buber distinguishes between two types of relationships, an I-it and an I-thou. In the I-it relationship, the image exists as an object. In an I-thou relationship, the other exists as a subject. So you're in a subject-subject relationship to the image. So since an image is not a living human being, this is an act of imagination. An I-thou relationship with an image means that you let it speak to you as part of yourself. So what this dialogue with the image produces is not the meaning of the image, which might be found in an academic exposition or critique, but a sense of meaningfulness in a relationship with the image. So if I were addressing a student, say, and I were talking about the 7 steps, if you want to put it that way, of the hero's journey, here's how I might talk. So the initial step is to choose the hero, an image of yourself as the hero. It can be anything that represents a self. It doesn't have to be a person. No matter anything, no matter how lowly, can function as a symbolic object. Then there's the shift. Something happens to you, maybe something not good. The academic researchers have moved away from the original call to adventure to the idea of a shift, meaning a change in setting, in life circumstances, and an openness to new experiences. And so answering the question, what calls you to change, or what represents the change you want to make? So the third is, you might think the call to adventure is known, but almost always it's into the unknown. It's more like a dark forest than anything else. Although the image that stands for the adventure to you may be something very known. An Olympic gold medal is very known. The journey there is full of surprises. So once you've gone on this quest, you will meet allies. This is the thing that at least a lot of the students I've talked to don't really trust. They think no one's there to help them. But here's where fairy tales can come into a lot of our thinking. The story of the 3 sons going out on a quest, and usually the youngest son is called Dumb Hands or Stupid Jack or something like that. And so they meet an old woman in the forest, and the oldest son says, "Get out of my way, old lady, I'm on a quest." And the second son says, "Get out of my way, old lady, I'm on a quest." Well, the third son, Stupid Hans, Dumb Jack, says, "Who are you? What do you need?" And in the fairy stories, you know the story. She always has the key to the castle, the magic word, whatever is needed. So half the job of having allies is seeing the allies that are already there. This is a mindset thing. So there's always a challenge. There's always a challenge. Without challenges, there is no story. There is no life. The call to adventure that begins the hero's journey is the call to set out on a road of trials. And the poet W.B. Yeats goes further than this and says, we're called to do the hardest thing among those not impossible. And so the hero might ask, why am I called to do a hard thing? Because without the challenge of the journey, he won't discover who he is. The nature of the venture is to realize the hero within, who often starts out as a poor abandoned orphan, that's how you might feel, and discovers he's the son of a king. And that's what happens to you. Symbolically, dwelling on an image of the challenge can produce the surprising result of an identification with it, as if that were the very challenge you had chosen for yourself. The identification is not the relatedness produced by the subject interaction with the protagonist image. It's different from that. But it has within it the possibility of the recognition of one's own power, as if you had chosen the hardest thing among those not impossible to wrestle with. Finally, there's a transformation. To undertake the hero's journey is not to be a victim of the dragon, but to choose to fight the dragon. Here's where the notion of the hero as the agent, as having agency, is so important. You choose to fight the dragon even if you appear to be losing. On this journey, the only way to fail the challenge is not to engage with it. That's because the goal is not success, but transformation. As the poet Gerard Manley Hopkins puts it, when he talks about self-making, what I do is me. For that I came. Finally, the legacy that you leave. Almost everyone wants to make the world at least a little better, or sing their song, or feel they left something for their children or grandchildren. Suicidal thoughts often come as a result of not believing this legacy is possible. The narrative in this case is a story of judgment or victimhood. I'm worthless, or the world would be better off if I were dead, or no one appreciates what I have to give. This is a story of the little that an individual life really means. But everyone has potential access to telling the story of their lives as a hero's journey, even if the dragon triumphs every time you wrestle with it. Campbell once said that we weren't looking for the meaning of life, but for the experience of the rapture of being alive. On this hero's journey, engaging with archetypal symbols deepens the experience of the meaningfulness of whatever we encounter along the way. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Betty Sue. That was wonderful. The hero's journey is such a fascinating topic, and you explained it so wonderfully and clearly. So thank you very much. Wow, this event is just another reminder of how wonderful the ARAS family is. I'm so grateful for everyone's participation today. And I encourage you all to put questions in the Q&A box if you have anything you'd like to ask this panel. So somebody asked if the ARAS guide is a physical book that you can buy. It's not. It's an online book that is found on aras.org. The link is aras.org/guide. And the reason it's not a physical book is because it contains so many great examples of papers with wonderful images. And the online book links to those full papers, and so it allowed us to to put a lot more into the book than we would have been able to had we had to deal with copyrights, image copyrights, and all of that. And so it allowed us to include a lot more material in the online form. And it also allows us to update it and add to it whenever we see fit. So that's why it's in the online form. Again, it's at aras.org/guide. And for those who asked if the presentation was recorded today, yes, it was. and it will be also available on our website in a couple of days. Let's see. Are there any resources of how to translate or modernize symbols and archetypes to inform today's challenges? That's a question from Cecilia. Would anyone like to talk about that? She says, are there any resources of how to translate or modernize symbols and archetypes to inform today's challenges?
Well, I think that was one of the things I was trying to point out in my presentation, that the culture is full of modernized versions of these ancient symbols. So the symbol making continues right up into our own time. And so almost any guide, such as the ARAS guide, is useful for updating how you would approach it, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, Tom, what do you think? You're muted, Tom. And so is Bruce, and so is Patricia. That's why I responded.
Yeah. Well, it's a really good question. I think I've just spent the last 6 months working on a field guide to modern American psyche and some of the profound disturbances that we're dealing with. And I actually, in a totally modern form, I went to artificial intelligence, AI, and generated over 100 images of the various forms that our so-called cultural complexes are taking, many of which, of course, have archetypal cores, so that in a way, the whole book is is an archetypal guide to the modern American psyche, which is in such turmoil. And that'll be coming out in December. But I was amazed how, many people are afraid of AI, or for all sorts of good reasons. And but I found AI's symbol making capacity rather stunning. And so I do think there are many of us who are wrestling with the notion of archetypal symbolic images in the context of our current political, and it's far more than a political crisis. It's really a crisis of who we are as human beings, both in the United States and elsewhere. So yes, I think there are resources out there, surprisingly, some of those which we fear the most. Uh, I would recommend any viewer go to AI, ChatGPT, with an archetypal concern and ask it to make an image and see what it does with it. Anyway, so I'm very tuned into the question, and I've been, in a way, struggling with it myself for the past many months.
We have a question from Jessica, who thanks us for the rich presentations today and is wondering about the resources of ARAS. What is digitized from the visual archive, and is it possible to search the archive and database on site in New York? Yes, it is. We love to have people come and visit ARAS in New York and to look through our files. The files are 100% digitized. Everything that's in the file drawers in our archive is available on our website. You can search the entire archive and see everything that's in the files. But yes, please visit us. If you would like to visit us in New York, please email us at info@aras.org, and we would love to have you come look through the files. We have Rick from Maine saying, Jungian analyst here. Being busy, I allowed my subscription to lapse, but this inspired me to resubscribe, which I did. So thank you very much, Rick. Glad to have you back. Let's see. We have someone who says, quotes William Stafford poem, A Story That Could Be True, the last stanza. Who are you really, wanderer? And the answer you have to give, no matter how dark and cold the world is, maybe I'm a king. This poem resonates with the hero's journey. So poetry produces images also. Thank you for that comment.
I think of poetry as a stopping place in a larger narrative, a place of contemplation and perhaps circumambulation around an image often. So poetry is the place that says, in the rushing line of the story of our lives, stop, behold, appreciate, contemplate.
Yuri says, Robert A. Johnson once said, modern society has lost the power of symbolic life, though we have not escaped our need for it. What you do at ARAS is very important to foster the development of symbolic thinking. Thank you. Thank you for that comment, Yuri. I totally agree. Well, I think we, unless there's any other remarks that you all would like to make, we're running out of questions from the audience.
I'm surprised that there were any questions because the presentations were so extraordinary and I felt smaller and smaller as we went along at how gripping my colleagues are, each of whom has pursued this in their very unique ways, and I'm just in awe of the depth and resonance that comes through how each of us ends up speaking about ARAS, and why a guide, in a way, our guide is essential because it's so complex. There's so many different pieces to this and different directions that you can take. And one of the goals of the guide was somehow to pull it together enough so that somebody approaching ARAS can find a way in, because it's very easy to get lost, and in some ways that's the goal. so it's getting lost and finding your way and getting lost again. And I think this has been a wonderful gathering in terms of that process.
Yeah, we have a couple of things that just came in as I made that last call. What are your thoughts about intuitive connection with the images that arise in dreams or in images that arise while awake?
Well, isn't that one of the things Jungian analysis does, is to circumambulate that and to increase the connectedness and to explore it? I asked my fellow panelist here, since I'm not an analyst.
Well, I would invite the person who asked the question, or anybody who has felt that or lives that question, to go again where the libido takes them. Is there an image in that dream, or is there an image in the reverie that one has that one can start to circumambulate, as we saw Bruce show us so beautifully, just to begin to come at it from all these different perspectives, and to go to ARAS with an image from your dream, or go to the website and just type in an aspect of that image, whether it's whatever it is, and you will see that it will start to meander. It will take you to another image, and then to another image, and it will open up. And that opening is really the enlivening of the image and the way to connect to its deeper meaning for you, which is what a symbol is about. It attracts you, it magnetizes you, and then it's going to take you somewhere that you don't really know, if you give it attention, if you care for it, if you nourish it. As Jung says, the face that we give to the unconscious is the face that it gives to us. So I don't know if anybody else would add to that, but I think ARAS is a wonderful place to take dream images, of course, especially if, right, you don't have an analyst at the time.
Jung had a beautiful sort of idea about when you have dreams or images that recur to you time and again, that they were like a shell that you would find on the beach, and that you don't necessarily know why it attracts your attention or why it's important to pick it up. But if you listen to that and you do pick it up, is that it may be something that you turn over again and again in your hand, in your pocket for a long time, because the idea is that it's by the contemplation of that thing that calls you that it starts to speak to you. So just what Betty Sue was talking about in terms of a relationship, an I-thou relationship to an image, is a beautiful way to put it, where you just move on the assumption that it's calling your attention for a reason.
Bruce, Brian asks if the mural with the ships in the harbor is still visible today.
Good question. It was framed and mounted at the hospital 30 years ago. I would be, they put it in a beautiful place. They put it in the ICU waiting room in the pediatric ward. So I have no idea whether or not it's still there these days, but it was for a long time.
We have a question from Mary Ellen. Any suggestion for those of us who are being instructed about the value of images to go about collecting our own imagery for our practices?
Could I say yes?
That was exactly what I was thinking, Bruce.
Yes. Yeah. I would say the more reverence you bring to it, the better. I mean, that to me is at the core of what ARAS was doing. It's the core of what Olga brought. It's the core of what ARAS is doing, is that there is something deeply meaningful about images that you cannot exhaust, but it can change by way of your attitude and your relationship to it. It can inform you in ways in which you can't necessarily understand. And that's true whether you're in depth analysis or whether you're an artist. You know, any relationship to the image that's valued will enrich you.
Any deep listening to anything, an image, nature, a person, will enrich your life exponentially.
Lynn asks, what happened?
Particularly in an age where we're being bombarded with unending messages interpreting the world for us, and almost no time is left for our own imaginative processes to circle around something and see how it comes alive. So in some ways, everything that's being said today goes against the mainstream of our cultural life, in which we're being increasingly bombarded, and particularly with our cell phones. I'm addicted to it, and since you can always get some message from somewhere that distracts you from your own internal processes, what we're doing is really offering an antidote to the way in which our modern bombardment with information and news or pseudo information takes us away from ourselves. I mean, it's staggeringly powerful, and every message so far that I've heard today goes against that tendency of the modern culture to endlessly distract ourselves, I think.
Tom, I felt that word relevance that you brought in at the beginning was so important. And I think you speaking to the relevance and the radicality that's present in ARAS. Actually, you know, I know that I came from the musty side of things because I love, you know, the objects and the body of the objects and the museums. But what you're talking about is really a radical attitude that is kept alive in this archive, that really is an attitude that can enrich our lives even more so, and is so timely for this moment in history.
What the algorithm does is hook us at the level of the ego, hook us with the things that don't challenge us. But I think a deep relation with an image, there's something about these images that always have a little something mysterious or strange are confrontational, are something that draws us out further than what the algorithm has decided. Oh, she likes chocolate ice cream, so more chocolate, more chocolate, more chocolate, in effect. There's something, especially some of these ancient images that we have in ARAS, some of the older ones that take us back into a deep history of our psychological heritage as human beings. They're very rich.
I think it
Well,
goes,
the image that we show, go ahead. Bruce, go ahead.
I think it goes with the idea about this guide, about trying to help develop a point of view and a reference point to the images that come.
Yes.
Right? So there's two pieces to that time, even when you say when you get bombarded, if you understand that as sort of being sort of swarmed by insects. I love that sort of in mythology. Sometimes they'll come at you, 10,000 at a time. And the trick is sort of to be able to hold your ground in relationship to that swarm of images and sort of keep an eye out for the one that resonates with you. So it's like looking for that mosquito that's blue. Right? And it's like that sense about there's going to be something there out of all of that noise that has some resonance for you. And so it's sort of training ourselves to have an eye towards that. That is a very different piece. And that's what I think is at the core of trying to help people relate to images.
I think that brings in the issue of time, and the importance of what C.A. Meyer talked about as a Jungian of incubating an image. What does it mean to incubate, to sit on it like the hen does, and heat it up and give it time. And that's an interesting thing that I would invite people who are asking questions about working with their own images to do. What does it mean to you to incubate the image or just sit with it, or as Betty Sue said, listen to it?
We used to be able to get signs from the world around us in the Middle Ages. So I often, when I was teaching world history, I would tell my students to go out into the world and ask a question that was deeply meaningful to them. And I gave them 10 minutes. And I said, be back in 10 minutes. You'll have an answer to your question. And they looked at me like, well, she really is crazy this time. But they all came back with answers because the world will speak to you if you're aware of the question, if you treat the world symbolically. So one girl said, does my boyfriend really love me? She sat under a tree. Nothing happened. 10 minutes was up. She stood up and she'd been sitting on a piece of paper that was shaped like a heart. I could go on. There's so many examples, but every student got something, even the student that said, this is a BS assignment. And he sat down on a bench right outside the door, not going to go outside looking for the image. And there happened to be a book on the bench, which was a book about an engineering book. Somehow I got there about how to construct toilets. And he said he realized, pardon my French, that he had a really shitty attitude towards the assignment. I just say that because this is, it's like why the tarot cards work. It's you are interacting with it. Part of you is in the world, and then the world reflects some deeper part of you back. It's a mirror to the inside, not to the outside.
So in a way, to answer Mary Ellen's question, if you want to go about collecting your own imagery, you just need to start and just open up to that possibility. Right. Well, I think we're going to have to wrap it up. Thank you so much for being here. We're so happy that you could be with us today. Please check out the guide to ARAS, which is available for free, no membership required, on our website, aras.org/guide. So many amazing articles to explore. We hope you like it and use it as a resource in your work and your art. And please get in touch at info@aras.org if you have any questions. There are some questions that I'll be answering via email that came in. Thank you, everyone, for submitting questions. And thank you very much for joining us today.